Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Mayorkas. Secretary Mayorkas, I am a former director of the Iowa Department of Public Health and a physician. During my duties as the Director of Public Health, I visited all of my county public health agencies, and several of the counties had dramatic spikes in tuberculosis because of the effects of immigration when they had not had an increase in tuberculosis or other infectious diseases in over 5 decades. I was at the border on Monday in El Paso, and yesterday I introduced my first piece of legislation, the REACT Act. This bill would require DHS to test for COVID-19 any migrant being released from CBP or ICE custody into the U.S. I've heard conflicting things today about testing. When we were there, migrants were not being tested, and they were released into the community, and often released into communities without knowledge of that community or foreknowledge. And what you said was that COVID-19 testing is required, and then isolation or quarantine once they've reached a community-based organization or an NGO or a sponsor. So very simply put, do you support or require testing for migrants before release, be it catch and release, be it released to a phone number on the shirt of a 1-year-old unaccompanied minor who has been to the border, or released into a community or to an NGO?
Congresswoman, can I take a minute, because I think there's a miscommunication here with respect to when that testing occurs. It is indeed our policy to test individuals who arrive into the United States, who are encountered at the border in between the ports of entry. It is our policy to test them. We did not have the capacity to test them at Border Patrol stations. We have since begun to build that capacity so that we can do the testing there, in addition to the other 3 means of testing individuals that I outlined in response to Congressman's earlier question. We do support the testing of individuals, and that is indeed our policy, and we have implemented practices to execute on that policy. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you. You said you support, but you don't require testing, and we know that in Brownsville, 108 migrants showed up in Brownsville and tested positive for COVID. Your department also recently announced it would be canceling an information sharing agreement with the Department of Health and Human Services. Personally, from what I experienced on the border this week, I think that's a mistake. We have unaccompanied minors as young as, you even said, some of them infants, but as young as 1-year-old, showing up with no adult supervision, with a phone number at which we're HHS is to call and turn them over to a sponsor. We need to ensure that the sponsors of unaccompanied minors are not going to turn around and traffic those minors. We've seen cases of this happening. This was conveyed to us by the Border Patrol agents and by the Border Patrol Union members. We know a small fraction of the unaccompanied minors self-identify to HHS officials as gang members. For those that are teenagers and single unaccompanied males, that their age may be under 18, but there's no verification of what age they are. Information not flowing to ICE officials that lead to domestic gang forces and partner with school resources. How are you going to ensure that working with HHS that these children are not handed over to traffickers? Is parentage or familial relationship being established by DNA testing or other documents vetting by DHS documented fraud experts? And will you continue to share information with HHS?
Congresswoman, allow me to take a minute to clarify your misunderstanding of what is and is not occurring. The Department of Health and Human Services runs background checks on individuals to ensure that the individuals in whose custody a child will be released is in fact capable of and responsible for that child. Individuals with criminal backgrounds, individuals who in fact are not who they say they are, individuals with other derogatory information that establishes that they are not responsible sponsors for children, the Department of Health and Human Services does not place those children in those individuals' custody, number one. Number two, the memorandum that was on the books achieved precisely the problem of which you speak. Individuals who were responsible sponsors were reluctant to come forward because their information with respect to their presence in the United States was turned over to ICE, despite the fact that they might be lawfully present, despite the fact that they may be perfectly capable and responsible for the needs of the child, and despite the fact that they may be a close relative, even a parent or legal guardian of that child. That memorandum that existed on the books chilled the very responsible conduct that underscores your question as a physician, and it is precisely the reason why we did not continue with that memorandum. The concerns that underlie your question are our concerns as well.
Thank you. And if I have some additional time, we also found that the border wall construction that had been funded.
Gentlelady's time has expired.